You ever notice how we tend to judge others harshly for their flaws, but get defensive when someone points out our own? Hello, listeners. Welcome back to The Path to Calm. Stop overthinking, become present, find peace. Today is the 24th of September, 2025. Today's episode is pulled from Nick Trenton's book, The Art of Self-Therapy: How to Grow, Gain Self-Awareness, and Understand Your Emotions. Today's episode comes from Chapter 2 of this book, and we've titled it, Take a Walk on the Dark Side with Shadow Work. Do you hide from your own anger, your own insecurities, or even your quirky traits that you wish were different? Really, by embracing these shadow aspects of ourselves, we can actually become happier and more authentic. In this episode, we're going to unpack a little bit about the power of shadow work and how it can transform your life. Now, shadow work, or the concept of the shadow itself, was introduced by Carl Jung. And we're going to look at a little bit of history there. And then we're going to take a look at 3 techniques that we can use practically to learn to accept our shadow. We're taught almost throughout our entire lives that we should hide our shadow. We should extinguish our shadow. We should control it. But it's more important to accept it. We're going to look at 3 effective techniques to understand how to accept the shadow. Technique number 1 is to pay attention to your emotional reactions. Technique number 2 is to embrace imperfection. Again, something we're taught not to do throughout most of our lives by society in general. And technique number 3, this opens yourself up for some hurt. Ask for feedback, an important step. Each of these are detailed out in the episode that follows, and you'll learn how to apply these into your own life to learn to accept your own shadow. Thanks for being with us today, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
When most people experience uncomfortable emotions, they want to do one thing and one thing only: get away from them. In fact, they may turn to therapy with precisely this attitude: make it go away. However, this is the opposite of the mindset you need. As we saw above, what's required is a willingness to tolerate, accept, and be with emotions. All our emotions, no matter how uncomfortable they are, and without judgment. If you start to make awareness and self-exploration a bigger part of your life, sooner or later, you're going to encounter parts of yourself that you really don't like. And your tendency will be to run as far away from them as possible. However, this is where the technique of shadow work comes into play. Carl Jung was the psychiatrist, author, and theorist who first introduced the idea of the shadow. In simple terms, the shadow is our psychological blind spot. It contains everything that we can't see, i.e., that's outside our awareness. Every person has a shadow, but the idea is that if we can acknowledge it, accept it, and integrate it back into our awareness as something that rightly belongs to us, we enjoy greater mental health, authenticity, creativity, energy, and maturity. When we're young, we have certain experiences that teach us that some parts of ourselves are acceptable and others aren't. In order to survive in the world and get our needs met, we unconsciously decide to disown those bad parts of ourselves and disidentify with them. We push them out of awareness. For example, our parents may tell us that our anger is bad and punish us when we yell or express frustration. So, we put anger into the shadow. It hasn't gone anywhere, but we don't see it anymore. This dark side of our conscious awareness doesn't contain just bad things, by the way. We can also disconnect from and disown positive feelings, attributes, or thoughts. We may put into the shadow things like excitement, hope, silliness, and so on, because of early experiences that taught us these things were bad. So, what's the problem? Isn't it a good thing to section off the worst parts of ourselves? The trouble is that the shadow is never completely hidden. It still shows itself. However, it may do so in sneaky ways. Our shadow may express itself in strange behaviors we don't understand, in dreams, in slips of the tongue, or in behavior others can see but we don't ourselves recognize. Perhaps our anger comes out in passive aggressiveness. We may say, "I'm the least angry person in the world." Yet somehow others can feel the anger radiating off us. It's because it's still there in the shadow. As long as we have a shadow, we'll remain at least partly unconscious of our deeper motivations and may be trapped in behaviors that are not good for us without really understanding why. On top of this, there's a sneaky phenomenon called projection, in which we end up incorrectly ascribing to others the feelings and thoughts we ourselves have, but have disowned and relegated to the shadow. The classic example is the person who's being dishonest but has pushed that fact out of awareness. The shadow seeps out, however, in the form of them constantly accusing others of hiding something or being dishonest. They're projecting when they say, "The problem isn't in me, it's in you." In this way, what we are unconscious of can harm us. It can threaten our relationships, jeopardize our work, and weaken our potential. It can also leave us confused, immature, and fragile people who lack wisdom and self-knowledge. The solution? Again, it's awareness. According to Jung, we improve our lives and heal when we integrate the shadow. That may sound like a good idea, but nobody wants to look at their shadow. Nobody wants to face up to the things they cannot face in themselves, by definition. So how exactly do we see what we can't see? Accepting the shadow. First things first, what you don't want to do is continue to judge and condemn the bad parts of yourself. After all, this is precisely what caused it to be shoved out of awareness in the first place. No, we cannot be whole and integrate the shadow by heaping on more scorn or shame. Instead, we need to be curious, compassionate, and open-minded. To engage our shadow, we need a few things: patience, a genuinely accepting and non-judgmental attitude, honesty, the willingness to be brave enough to face things we don't like about ourselves. Here are a few ways to do that. Technique 1. Pay attention to your emotional reactions. Imagine someone has a drinking problem that they can't quite admit to themselves. In their shadow is everything they deny about themselves: a lack of self-control, frequent reckless behavior, and even the habit of denial itself. They are unwilling to face up to the fact that they behave in ways they don't like when they drink too much, and unwilling to accept the shame they feel because of it. In fact, they could go for years never acknowledging this problem. One day, this person notices themselves feeling extremely judgmental about a friend who smokes marijuana. They say, "It's totally irresponsible. Don't they care about what they're doing to their health? So reckless. They obviously lack self-control. I'm so disappointed in them." Others might be puzzled at this outburst. Why such a strong reaction? The answer probably lies in the person's shadow. Read through their thoughts again, and you'll see that this is, in fact, what they think of themselves. The shadow can hide from awareness, but it often shows itself as judgment of others, or strong and disproportionate reactions that don't quite fit the situation at hand. It's a good idea to become aware of anything that seems to push your buttons and cause a reaction that's bigger than it should be. Prick your ears if you seem to have been triggered automatically by something, and become curious why. What bothers you in others is often something you've disowned in yourself. Technique 2. Embrace imperfection. While rage, jealousy, and lust are all understandably relegated to the shadow, most of what we put there isn't really so bad when you think about it. The shadow may feel big and scary and overwhelming, but it's often like the monster under the bed. When you peek to check, there's nothing there. If you can learn to embrace flaws and imperfection, and accept that you are a complex person with both good and bad qualities, then you weaken the power of the shadow. One way to do this is to consciously decide you'll judge and condemn others less often. Hint, to the extent you judge them, you also judge yourself. Another idea is to deliberately ask, what's so wrong with being a flawed human being? Here's an exercise to try. 1. Identify the attributes, ideas, thoughts, or feelings you most often judge in others. 2. Write them down. I hate stupid people. 3. Now rephrase the sentences so they apply to you. I can be stupid sometimes. 4. Read through these new sentences and notice how you feel. Ask yourself, is it really the end of the world if they're true? Does it mean that you're not worthy of love or that you don't also possess good qualities? You may notice that the more forgiving you are about other people's stupid mistakes, the easier it is to accept occasional stupidity in yourself, and vice versa. 5. If you're having trouble, try to imagine a loved one who has that attribute, yet whom you still adore and respect anyway. Maybe you realize that your pet Labrador is the stupidest being on the planet, but that doesn't stop them from also being the one you love the most. Imagine that you two are perfectly acceptable as you are, warts and all. Technique 3, ask for feedback. Your shadow is a bit like the back of your head. You can't see it, but it may be very visible to everyone else. Asking someone you trust and respect to help you see your blind spots takes some courage, but it's well worth it. Identify someone who you believe knows you well. The last thing you want is to ask someone who will accidentally project their own shadow onto you. Ask someone who themselves has been able to demonstrate emotional maturity and who will be happy to help you look objectively at your shadow without bringing judgment into the situation. Since this may be a tall order, another option is to enlist the help of a therapist, counselor, or psychologist to help you work through the more sensitive parts of your shadow. They'll be able to hold you accountable while keeping a safe space that won't trigger more defensiveness in you. If both of these options are not feasible, you can always sit down and carefully consider the feedback you've already received from others. Can you find any themes or patterns in what you've been told by ex-partners, old bosses, or current ones, friends, family members, or even random people? You may already have been given heaps of feedback that consistently points to your shadow, only you haven't been courageous enough to take it fully on board. Notice if you repeatedly find yourself angry with people's appraisals of who you are. Again, it's about noticing disproportionate reactions and ask honestly if they may have a point. Think back to disagreements you may have had, or recall criticisms or advice others may have repeatedly given you. You may have dismissed it in the past, but could it be that others have said similar things? Could there be a pattern? The important thing about shadow work is that you're not trying to play gotcha. You're not attempting to catch yourself out or punish yourself. If, on reflection, you notice that more than a handful of people have mentioned how over the top you can be at times, just own and acknowledge that. Avoid getting lost in shame or embarrassment about it. Just accept it gracefully and be proud of yourself that you're able to be aware. If that fails, one technique always works: humor. Laugh at yourself a little. Oh, there I go again. What a drama llama I am. How do you put up with me?
And here's the primary takeaway from today's episode. Carl Jung was the first to talk about the shadow, which is an archetype that contains all the unconscious and disowned parts of our psyche. We reintegrate the shadow with patience, non judgmental acceptance, honesty, and the willingness to face our dark side. We can do this by noticing disproportionate emotional reactions that may hint at the shadow's presence, mindfully embrace our imperfections and weaknesses, and humor helps, as well as ask others for their honest feedback on what we can't see in ourselves. And that brings us to the end of our shadow journey. Thanks for walking this path with me today. Remember, the goal of shadow work isn't to get rid of your flaws, but to understand and accept them. And by paying attention to your emotional triggers and embracing your own imperfections, you can turn your hidden self from an enemy into an ally. Don't forget to check out our featured book, The Art of Self-Therapy by Nick Trenton, on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes, many other platforms, and you'll find more insights on self-awareness. We'll leave you with this quote today from Carl Jung. There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. To round itself out, life calls not for perfection, but for completeness.